Alright guys, so Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a trading card game where two people fight against each other. They both usually have 8,000 life points, and when your life points hit 0, you lose the game. So basically, you summon your monsters and then use them to attack the other person to try to get their life points to hit 0 before yours do so that you can win the game. It sounds super simple, but this is actually one of the most complex and honestly just ridiculous games that I've ever really gotten into. And I think that anybody who likes video games or really just likes any kind of competition in general should give this game a try. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you why. So in a normal card game like Uno, for example, there's a predetermined selection of cards that are going to be used in every game. So even though you don't know exactly what, you can pretty much just assume what kind of cards the other person has in their hand. You know, they're going to have like some numbers and some skip U's and some draw 4s and things like that. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't just a normal card game, it's a trading card game, and it has over 10,000 cards, I think, and you're allowed to put up to 3 of almost any of those cards in your deck, as long as it's between 40 and 60 cards. So when you're playing somebody in Yu-Gi-Oh! For the first time, you have literally no idea what they're going to play against you. And what makes it crazier is that a lot of these cards are kind of related to each other and follow a theme. Most of the time there's one monster and then there's a bunch of cards that help that monster, and we call these support cards. Most of the time you can tell that two cards are in the same theme or archetype because their artwork is really similar and sometimes has the same characters in them. But the thing is that one monster can have like 10 or even 20 support cards. So you can make your whole deck pretty much themed around this one monster and then other monsters that work well with it, and then it's support cards. But then some archetypes work well with other archetypes, and then those archetypes work well with other archetypes, and then you can mix them all together to just make this well-oiled machine where one card activates this card and then that card activates this card. It feels like making some kind of machine out of redstone in Minecraft. Now, I've made a lot of decks and I have a lot of archetypes that I like, but just for an example, I'm going to show you guys my favorite one, the Ojama archetype. Now, this isn't the simplest one, and as I talk about it more in depth, it's going to get pretty complicated, but just try to follow along the best you can. I'm just trying to show you guys an example of what an archetype is and then how you can use it to make a deck. Alright, so Ojamas. There's 3 main ones: Ojama Green, Ojama Black, and Ojama Yellow. They have no special effects that they do when they're summoned. They have 0 attack, so even if they hit your opponent, they won't do any damage. And the only card text they have says, he's one of the Ojama trio. It said that he butts in by any means necessary. It's also said that when the 3 are together, something happens. So at surface level, these look like horrible cards. But the thing that makes this deck really cool is that the support for it really brings these cards to life. There's also 3 more Ojamas, and these ones are different because they're orange, meaning that they have a special effect. The first one is Ojama Blue. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can add 2 Ojama cards from your deck to your hand, which is pretty easy to do because he has 0 attack, so anybody that this guy fights, he's going to lose, and then when he gets destroyed, you'll be able to look through your deck for 2 Ojama cards. Then we have Ojama Red. When this card is normal summoned, you can special summon up to 4 Ojama monsters from your hand in attack position. In English, that means when you summon this guy, you can summon up to 4 more other Ojamas from your hand. Then we have Ojama Pink, who is a little bit more complicated, but in English basically means that when this card is destroyed and sent to the place where cards go when they get destroyed, called the graveyard, both players draw 1 card and then discard 1 card to the graveyard. And then if you discarded an Ojama themed card, you can pick one of the spots where your opponent summons monsters at, and then they can't use it for the rest of their turn. I don't really think Ojama Pink is that good, and I don't really play him, but out of these 5 Ojamas, you can kind of already see the little strategy that's going on with these guys and how they work together. Let's say your opening hand has Ojama Green, Ojama Black, and Ojama Blue. You would summon Blue, wait for your opponent to destroy him so that you can search your deck for 2 Ojama cards, and then summon Red, whose ability lets you summon up to 4 other Ojamas, and then use that to summon Ojama Yellow, Green, and Black, and then you have the whole trio. I guess this is what the card text means when it says that they butt in by any means necessary. But what does the other part mean where it says that when they're all together, something happens? Ojama Delta Hurricane! If you control Ojama Green, Ojama Yellow, and Ojama Black, destroy all cards your opponent controls. Alright, so we destroyed all of the opponent's cards, but all of our monsters literally have 0 attack. So even though he has no monsters to defend himself with, if we hit him, we wouldn't do any damage. Well, luckily, we have another card in our hand called Ojama Country. Ojama Country is a field spell, which means it's played off to the side separately from your spell zones, and has a continuous effect that lasts until it gets destroyed. What's cool about this card is it switches the attack and defense of all monsters on the field, meaning that now all of the Ojamas have 1000 attack and 0 defense, and we can hit our opponent with all of them, dealing 4,000 damage. And then since they took damage, we can play the best card in our deck, Cover Up Cat, It's like I'm playing. The main strategy that people normally do is fuse these monsters together. Yes, some monsters can fuse together to make other cards called fusion monsters, to make two different cards, Ojama King and Ojama Knight. And what these cards do is they close off your opponent's monster zones so that they can't use them. And then they use these in combination with other cards like Ground Collapse, which close off monster zones. And then Ojama Trio, which when activated just gives your opponent 3 Ojama tokens, which basically just closes off 3 monster zones so that they can't use them. And all of this together makes what people call a zone lock deck. And I've tried this deck a couple of times. It's really finicky and doesn't really work most of the time, because if you're not going to close off all 5 of your opponent's monster zones, then like you might as well not even close any of them off, because people usually have only one super powerful boss monster anyway, so they only really need like 1 or 2 spots, to be honest. But I mentioned earlier how some archetypes actually work together with other archetypes, and Ojamas work well with armed dragons and another archetype that's called union monsters. More specifically, the union monsters called A, B, and C dragon. These guys can combine with each other to make ABC Buster Dragon, which is a super powerful card and has an ability that lets you discard one of your own cards to banish any card that your opponent controls. Banish meaning just completely remove from play, not send to the graveyard, just take out of the game. And what's cool is that you can also disassemble this card back into its parts if it's about to be destroyed, and then fuse it back together into the dragon again. The Ojama archetype just pretty much covers up the union monster's archetype's weaknesses, which is that it can be pretty hard to get this monster out, and that's the point. It's a super powerful monster that has the ability to banish one of your opponent's cards every turn, so that's why it's super difficult to bring out. But Ojamas solve this problem with a card called Ojama Simulation, which says reveal 1 light machine fusion monster from your extra deck and banish any number of Ojama monsters from your hand, face-up field, or graveyard. Special summon fusion materials with different names whose names are specifically listed on the card you revealed from the hand, deck, or graveyard, equal to the number of monsters banished to activate this effect. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 3 of your banished Ojama monsters, shuffle them into the deck, then draw 1 card. So that's pretty complicated, but in English, it basically means that you can substitute Ojamas for ABC dragon parts. So let's say you only have a Assault Core, but you have 2 Ojamas in your deck. You can use Ojama Assimilation to banish those 2 Ojamas and then summon B and C, and then fuse those together to make ABC Dragon. And then it has a second ability, which means that after Ojama Assimilation is used and is in your graveyard, you can banish it to take 3 of your banished Ojamas, put them back into your deck, and then draw a card. Ojama Assimilation is pretty much the card that brings these 2 archetypes together. This is made even better by what's pretty much the best card in the Ojama archetype called Oja Magic. When this card is discarded or sent to the graveyard, you can go through your deck and get 1 Ojama Green, 1 Ojama Black, and 1 Ojama Yellow, and then add it to your hand. So ABC Dragon Buster has an ability where you discard 1 card to banish one of your opponent's cards. You can discard Oja Magic because when it gets discarded, you get 1 of each of the Ojamas. Then you can use Ojama Assimilation to banish those 3 Ojamas and then replace them with ABC Dragons, and then fuse those together to make another ABC Dragon Buster, and then use Ojama Assimilation's second ability to banish it from your graveyard to take those 3 Ojamas that you just banished and put them back into your deck and then draw a card. So you did all that basically for free and got to draw a card for it. I'll go Assimilation. Do this shit again. Do the trio. Then let's get the other trio. And we'll do the goob to activate the gay. I'll use Ojama Assimilation's effect. So let me get the 3 Ojamas back.
The deck and draw a card, yeah.
And that'll let me draw. So I'm going to use his ability to discard this. Get this out of here.
I'll change the effect of my time feed for a doer. I'm going to detach both a monster and a spell to draw a card and banish it until the end phase.
Alright, that's fine. I'm going to set a face down and then a direct. See? It's so cool, bro. And now you know how it works. Ojama ABC Dragons. This is considered a pretty goofy, funny deck that you don't really see very often because it would get completely demolished by any kind of meta or competitive deck. Playing this deck is pretty much the equivalent to playing like Braum in League of Legends. It's a good character, but you don't really see him that often, but he's still such a respectable and well-known character that when you pick Braum, people on your team and the other team are going to be like, oh, it's Braum. That's pretty cool, dude. Yo. And that's how people usually react when you play this against them. They're like, oh, it's Ojamas. And then they're eager to watch because they want to see how you're going to exactly make this work, because the 3 Ojama cards are like actually horrible. Now, there's other types of union monsters besides just the ABC ones. There's also X, Y, Z, and V and W. But I don't really use those because after ABC, it just gets way too complicated for me to even actually pull this shit off in a game. The XYZ dragons behave just like the ABC ones do, but instead of ABC dragon, they combine into XYZ dragon cannon. And this card's ability is that you can discard a card to destroy one of your opponent's cards, but there's no limit on it. It's not once per turn. You can just destroy as many as you want, which at first sounds a lot better than ABC dragon's ability, which lets you banish a card once per turn. But when you think about it and how many cards actually benefit from being in the graveyard and how many cards just go straight to the extra deck when they're destroyed, it's actually better, at least in my opinion, to just be able to completely just banish a card and remove it from play instead of just move cards around, essentially, since the graveyard is just a lot of decks second hand, even though it's only once per turn. V and W combine to make VW Tiger Catapults, and this card's ability lets you discard one card to change the battle position of another card, so you can just change it from attack mode to defense mode, which is kind of useless, I'm not gonna lie. But then these two cards combine into VWXYZ Dragon Catapult Cannon, and this card's ability just lets you banish a card once per turn without having to discard anything. And then ABC Dragon Buster and XYZ Dragon Cannon can also combine with each other to make A to Z Dragon Buster Cannon, which, if you remember earlier, armed dragons are the other archetype that work well with Ojamas, so I guess you're intended to have all 3 of them in one deck. But you combine those together to make Armed Dragon Catapult Cannon, which has the ability of once per turn, you can discard one of your cards to banish all cards your opponent controls and in their graveyard. It might as well just say once per turn, you can just win the game. And if you're in the position where you can go through that entire itinerary of shit to be able to summon this thing, then you're basically already winning the game anyway. By the time you summon this thing, your opponent will have like 1 life point left and you'll have just wasted your time. But even though that Ojama ABC deck that I showed you before might have seemed a little complicated if it's your first time hearing about it, you can see how easily this can just get even more complicated than that. My deck is just like a more simplified, streamlined version of the actual deck, and it's still that complicated. I guess that just really shows how deep this game goes. So in Yu-Gi-Oh, there's something called a win condition, and it's basically the objective of your deck, like what you're actually trying to do. For example, with the ABC Ojama deck, I would say its win condition is using Ojamas as fuel to try to get out at least 1 copy of ABC Buster Dragon as fast as possible, so that whatever strategy your opponent tries to set up or whatever card they play, you can just banish it and shut it down and then beat them to death with it. But there's actually other ways to win the game besides just lowering your opponent's life points to 0, and that's where we get into some of the more weird and wacky archetypes. The most well-known of these is the Exodia deck, whose main monster is called Exodia the Forbidden One. The card text says, if you have right leg of the Forbidden One, left leg of the Forbidden One, right arm of the Forbidden One, and left arm of the Forbidden One, in addition to this card in your hand, you win the duel. So if you have these 5 cards in your hand, you just win. Now, at first glance, that sounds pretty broken, but if you look at the cards inside of Dueling Nexus, which is the thing that I use to play this game, I'll tell you more about it later, you can see that there's actually a little 1 in the top left corner, and that means the card is limited to 1 copy per deck. So you can only have 1 of each of these cards, and it's like, oh, that's why nobody plays this shit. You can only have 1 of each. So the main strategy with this deck is to just use other cards to stall your opponent out and protect yourself while you draw through your deck and look for all 5 of the pieces so that you can win. And it's probably the most boring way to play the game. Just play Threatening Roar and Waboku to stop your opponent from attacking you, to let you draw cards, and just hope that you draw all of the pieces so that you can win. Like, damn. Now, people have tried to make this deck work, but it's never really gotten to a point where it's better than just playing the game normally. And that's because drawing cards in Yu-Gi-Oh is a lot bigger is a bigger deal than it is in other trading card games. That's because if you notice, Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really have an energy system like other trading card games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon have. In Pokemon, cards' abilities cost energy, and you can only attach 1 energy to them every turn. So because of this, cards can have super powerful effects, but they could just give them a really high energy cost to kind of gatekeep them until a certain stage in the game. Because if something costs 3 energy, you can't really use it until turn 3. And they also have have cards like trainers, which have super powerful effects like draw 3 cards or something like that, but they can only be used once per turn. And Magic the Gathering is basically the same thing, but with lands instead of energy, and you don't attach them to a monster or creature or anything. You just put them in the bottom of the board, and you can only put down 1 land per turn, so it's basically the same as energies, but they just apply to everything, not just one monster. And summoning monsters and playing spells cost mana, which is what lands give you when you tap them. Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really have anything like that, meaning that any spell or any trap, you can just play it, unless it has a cost that's listed on the card. And you can play as many of them as you want. There's no limit. This is what makes Yu-Gi-Oh such a fast-paced game and makes all of these different combos that I'm talking about possible, because you can play as many spells or traps as you want for free. So this makes it super easy to just burst through your entire deck and draw the whole thing and just get exactly what you need to be able to pull off your combo and win. So that's why a lot of cards that let you draw usually have some downside, like Pot of Desires, for example, that lets you draw 2 cards but then banish the next 10 off the top of your deck. Brutal, just to draw 2 cards. And then on top of that, you can only use it once per turn. That's how valuable card draw is in Yu-Gi-Oh! That the price to draw 2 cards is you banish the next 10.
Yeah, well, let me look up Pot of Desires. What does that do again?
It's insane. You draw 2 cards, banish the next 10. Face down.
What?
Yes.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's awful.
Look it up.
What?
It's real. Banish the next. Look, I'll stream.
I
Show
see
you.
it. I just looked at it. That's
Banish
awful.
the next 10
That's
face
so
down.
terrible.
Brutal. Such a sacrifice for 2 cards.
Dude, that's so. Oh my god, that's awful. Jesus, I've never used. That's terrible.
And I know that if you've been paying attention to the video, you may be thinking that like, oh, this would actually work really well in the ABC Ojama deck, because that deck has ways to get back banished cards anyway. So it would be like drawing 2 cards with no cost. But I've thought of it before you. When Pot of Desires banishes the cards from your deck, it banishes them face down. So you don't even know what they are or what's actually even missing from your deck. It's insane. According to the rule set of the game, you can't technically choose them to add back to your deck because they're face down and you don't know what they are, so you can't quote-unquote choose them to add back to your deck. And this is the main reason why Exodia can never really work. All of the cards that let you draw through your deck fast enough to be able to get the Exodia pieces before you lose the game have these ridiculous downsides, like making you banish the top 10 cards off of your deck, or having to discard your entire hand after your turn is over. And all of the cards that don't have any downsides to them are banned. Like Pot of Greed, for example, which is probably the most iconic card in this game. I'm sure you've seen this before. You can kind of understand why this is banned and just so ridiculously broken. You can just, for free, be able to draw 2 more cards that you can then instantly play for free. But what happens when you play Exodia with all of these banned cards?
I'm gonna go into the void.
Go on.
I'm gonna go into the void. And I'm gonna go Upstart Goblin. Into Upstart Goblin.
Okay, it's one of these.
Okay, and then we're gonna use the most complicated card in the game, Pot of Greed.
Okay, so you're playing trad format.
You're playing Pot. No. All right, we're gonna go Graceful Charity. All right, then we're gonna.
I was about to say, when you're not paying attention to the rules of the game.
This. All right.
No, he's not paying attention to the rules of the game. Like,
we're gonna play 2 table of contents. Right.
Like Matt.
To play 2 table of contents.
You can already tell what kind of
go
thing
into the void.
Yeah, I know I've lost this because
go
I know
Graceful
exactly.
Charity. All right.
Into the void.
Actually, not. This deck can actually end up breaking.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Okay, there's hope. Okay, we got terraforming. All right, terraforming and the chicken game.
Chicken game is legal now.
We're gonna draw a card. All right.
This isn't even traditional format because you're running multiple copies
Pot
of
of Greed.
stuff.
Into Pot of Greed. Then we're gonna go library. We're gonna attach the sword to library.
Like, look at this
Then
guy.
we're gonna bamboo sword. All right. Then we're gonna terraforming for chicken game. Then we're gonna use library's ability. All right. Then we're gonna use that chicken game. All right, now, in case you didn't know, chicken game. All right, lets me draw a card. So we're gonna do that.
Okay.
I know what Chicken Game did.
Yeah, we're gonna use bamboo sword
back in the day.
Alright, then we're gonna use Terraforming, my favorite card. Now, in case you forgot, Chicken Game actually lets me draw a card.
I was gonna say that this is the oldest
Library's ability
deck in the world.
Then we're gonna play Bamboo Sword. Then we're gonna play Upstart Goblin. Then I think we'll do another Bamboo Sword. I'm gonna use Library's ability. Then we're gonna. Christ. Then
if you break on this next cat, if you break now, you're dead.
Then we're gonna use activate Bamboo Sword. Then we're gonna use the Bamboo Sword again to get Magical Library's ability. Oh no, I don't have it. No. Okay, we're gonna use Monster Reborn to get your Ash Blossom.
Okay.
Then damn, I'm bricking. Then we're gonna we're gonna
Frickin', you've got 2 cards left in your deck.
I did those are the 2 Exodia pieces. I can't get them. All right. I'm gonna set a card face down. And yeah, your turn. What? No! No!
Into the void, Crocs.
No! No!
Yeah, that. And I still lost. Insane. Exodia is definitely the most popular alternate win condition besides just lowering your opponent's life points to 0. But the second most popular one is called Destiny Board. Destiny Board is a trap card that lets you search through your deck once per turn to look for a spirit message piece and then place it to the right of the trap card. And basically you just do this every turn until you spell out the word final or death in some prints of the card. And then once you spell out the whole word, you win the game. Now you'll probably never see anybody play this in your entire life because this, I think, is the worst alternate win condition that there is. And it's mainly because one of the drawbacks of Destiny Board is that when this trap card gets destroyed, it destroys all of the spirit message pieces. So you can be all the way at A and just need to put down L to be able to win the game, and then F gets destroyed. So then you have to throw away all of the letters and then start all over again. Also, you might notice that the Destiny Board pieces actually fill up your spell and trap zones, so you can't even use them. You can't set down any other traps because you're gonna need all 5 spaces to be able to put these Destiny Board pieces in. You can't play any type of spell or trap that's continuous where like the card stays there because you need the whole bottom of your board. Now the strat with this is to basically just have some super tanky monster with some high defense like Millennium Shield or something, and then just pray to God basically that you can survive 5 turns without your opponent having any kind of removal at all, because all they have to do is just destroy the one piece and then it all gets thrown away and you have to start over. Now pretty recently actually Yu-Gi-Oh did print some Destiny Board support. They made this one field spell that I can't really think of off the top of my head and am too lazy to look up the name of, where every time your opponent direct attacks you, you get to flip a coin, and if the coin lands on heads, then they actually take the damage that would be dealt to you. And the idea is that it's supposed to protect you from direct attacks while you build up Destiny Board, but it's still just luck. It's RNG. You can just theoretically get direct attacked every single time still, so it's not really good to rely on this card to be able to do this strategy. Field Spell also has a second ability which lets you actually place the Destiny Board pieces as monster tokens instead of in your spell and trap zone, so you can free that up and like actually be able to play the game. But they're not treated as monsters, so you can't use them to block attacks or anything like that. It's like they kind of just exist in your monster zone. So now instead of taking up all 5 trap zones, they just take up all 5 monster zones now, so the problem isn't really solved. But the thing is, Destiny Board and Exodia were never really meant to be these super meta competitive decks. They're just these super finicky decks that sometimes work, and they're just supposed to be played for fun as some kind of gimmick. So when you keep that in mind, it's understandable why they're so bad, but it's still fun to discuss. Another alternate win condition that's even weirder is Jackpot 7. This card in your possession is sent to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect. Banish this card. If 3 of your Jackpot 7 are currently banished and were all banished by this effect, you win. So basically, when you play this card, it shuffles itself back into your deck. And if your opponent somehow makes you discard all 3 of your jackpot 7s from your deck, then you win. This is such a weird win condition because it's your opponent's card effect, not yours. So you can't just discard the jackpot 7s from your deck by yourself. Your opponent has to do it. And if your opponent sees you play jackpot 7 and then reads it and watches it go back into your deck, then they're just not going to make you discard cards from your deck. And not many decks can even do that anyway. So the way people have found to make this work is there's a card called Dark Scorpion Burglars. And it says when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent sends 1 spell card from their deck to their graveyard. So people have found that if you use this card along with another one called Sheehan Spy, you can actually give your opponent Dark Scorpion Burglars and then use a card called Super Hippo Carnival to summon these hippo tokens that have 0 attack and 0 defense, and then use those to attack your opponent's Dark Scorpion Burglars. And then since you took damage from Dark Scorpion Burglars, you have to go through your deck and then discard a spell, and then you choose jackpot 7 and then somehow pull that off 2 more times and then win. That is insane.
But believe it or not, it gets even worse with these weird alternate win conditions. I think the worst one has to be Victory Dragon. This card cannot be special summoned. To tribute summon this card, you must tribute 3 dragon type monsters. If this card attacks your opponent directly and reduces their life points to 0, you win the match. Like, don't you win anyway? All right, so I went and did a little bit of research on this card because I just couldn't believe that that's what the card actually did. But there's actually a difference between a duel and a match. So in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, like if you're playing at a competition or something, they actually play best out of 3. So a duel is just 1 game, but a match is that best out of 3 duels, if that makes any sense. So if you win the duel by attacking with Victory Dragon, then you win the whole match and you don't have to play anymore, you just win. So in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can give up and just surrender at any time. So what people would actually do is when Victory Dragon was summoned, they would just surrender so that Victory Dragon couldn't hit them, and then they could go on to the next game in the match. So then different places that were hosting these Yu-Gi-Oh competitions decided to make a rule where you couldn't surrender once the other person summoned Victory Dragon. But then other people would argue and be like, well, it doesn't say that on the card. Like, since when can you just make up rules and add them to cards? Does that mean I can make up rules and add them to cards since you can? And then it would always just make debates and arguments at Yu-Gi-Oh competitions whenever somebody would summon Victory Dragon. So that's why Yu-Gi-Oh went ahead and banned the card, even though it's so bad. They just prohibited it from being played anywhere, because whenever it is played, it would just halt everything and just cause all of these disputes. But I do think that Victory Dragon might be like the worst card in Yu-Gi-Oh, because this card single-handedly just shut down entire Yu-Gi-Oh competitions apparently. The last weird and corny win condition I can think of is called milling. Mill is a term that comes from Magic the Gathering, which basically means when you go to draw a card but there's no more cards left, so you lose. It's the same in Yu-Gi-Oh. You draw 1 card per turn, and then if you can't draw that card because your deck is empty, then you lose. So people have come up with tactics to actually get their opponent to run out of cards in their deck so that they can't draw anymore and then lose. The most common one is to use a card called Needleworm, which when you summon it in face down defense position and then flip it up, it has an effect that makes your opponent discard the top 5 cards of their deck. So what people do is they summon Needleworm and then use some of the Book of cards like Book of Moon or the other red book, I can't remember what it's called, to just flip this card up and down over and over again. Because whenever it gets flipped up, the effect activates where they have to discard 5 cards. Alright, so at this point, I think I've talked about pretty much every weird and wacky archetype and win condition that I know about, at least. I'm sure there's like a billion more that I've never heard of because the game has over like 10,000 cards. I also thought that it would be a really good idea to talk about some of my favorite archetypes as well. Now, I already mentioned earlier that my favorite is Ojamas. I just like the whole idea of there being these super weak cards that have literally 0 attack and no special effects or anything, but when they all work together, they can just destroy your opponent's entire board and just steamroll them and then combine into some Megazord Power Rangers dragon. That's just my favorite archetype by far. But I think I want to start this section by talking about my friend's favorite archetype, the Dinomist cards. Now, the Dinomist are pendulum monsters, which means that they work a little bit differently than the other cards that I showed you guys up to this point. A pendulum monster is a spell and a monster in one card. So to try to explain this
this as simply as possible. Pendulum monsters have these little icons on them with numbers next to them, and these represent a level of a monster. So you take two pendulum monsters with different numbers and then put them on the leftmost and rightmost spell zones. So then since these are here, you can special summon any monster from your hand that has a level that's in between those two numbers. Pendulum monsters also have special effects when they're in the spell zone, because when they're there, they act as a continuous spell. Now, Dinomist monsters aren't really the most powerful monsters. The Dinomist with the highest attack is Dinomist Spinos, which only has 2500. But that's not really the point of Dinomist cards. The point is to just have as many on the field as possible, because all of them have special effects which let you benefit from having other Dinomist out. For example, they all have a special effect that says if another Dinomist card you control will be destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can destroy this card instead. So you can discard Dinomist cards to protect other ones that are more valuable to you. If you have a Dinomist that you want to protect because it's winning you the game, you can just discard a different one. And since the Dinomists don't really have very high attack, they have a ton of other abilities that help them in fights. For example, Dinomist Stegosaur says if another pendulum monster you control battles an opponent's monster, after damage calculation, you can destroy both. So you can just crash a Dinomist that has no right winning a fight with another monster just to get them both destroyed. But it gets even crazier when you look at the spell and trap support for the Dinomist, especially Dinomist Howling. This card is the bane of my existence. I fucking hate this card. It says when this card is activated, you can place 1 or 2 Dinomist pendulum monsters from your deck in your pendulum zones. But you cannot pendulum summon monsters until the end of the turn except Dinomist monsters. Once per turn, if this card is already face up in your spell and trap zone, you contribute 1 Dinomist monster, then target 1 card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. Not destroy it. Return it to the hand, which is so much worse than destroying it, because in a lot of decks, you actually benefit from having your cards in the graveyard, like the Blue Eyes deck, for example. But if the card is just returned to your hand completely and not even sent to the graveyard, you would just have to go through the process of summoning it all over again. There's no way to just get it back unless it was below a 4-star and you can just summon it again. It gets even crazier when you realize that Dinomist monsters can't actually be destroyed. When a pendulum monster gets destroyed after it's summoned, it just gets sent to your extra deck. And this is important because there's another card called Dinomist Charge, which basically just lets you get a Dinomist card back from your extra deck and then put it into your hand. So you can activate Howling to destroy one of your pendulum monsters to make the other person put a card back into their hand. And then since it goes to the extra deck when it's destroyed, use Dinomist Charge to get it from the extra deck and put it back into your hand. And then just summon it again. And it's like it wasn't even destroyed. And if you only have one monster on the field when Dinomist Howling gets activated, then you're fucked. Unless you have a way to destroy Dinomist Howling, because your opponent can just destroy their Dinomist to keep putting your card back into your hand and then hitting you directly. So you just get stuck in this loop where whenever you summon a monster, it just keeps getting put back into your hand and you keep getting slapped in the face. And then they can just use Dinomist Charge to get those destroyed Dinomists back from their extra deck and then play them again just to destroy them with Howling. And then you just get stuck in this fucking loop where you can't do anything and you just lose. It's insane. And even if you do have a way to destroy Howling, they'll just use one of the Dinomist effects, which lets them tribute the card to stop another card from being destroyed, and then just use Dinomist Charge to get it back, and then play it again, and then send your card back to your hand. It's terrible! There's some other really good Dinomist cards, like Dinomist Rush, which lets you special summon 1 Dinomist monster from your deck, not your hand, your deck, and it makes it unaffected by card effects. It makes it unaffected by your opponent's card effects, but it gets destroyed during the end phase. So you can use Dinomist Rush to special summon Dinomist Spinos from your deck, which has an ability where you contribute 1 other Dinomist monster to let it attack directly, and then just do 2500 damage to your opponent's life points. There's so many different crazy combos you can pull off with these guys because they all work together with each other so well, and when they're destroyed, they just go to the extra deck and you can just bring them back with Dinomist Charge. So there's really infinite possibilities with these guys.
They all help each other out. And then Charge is even better, because Charge makes it to where instead of them being only in the extra deck, Charge makes it to where once per turn, either your turn or my turn, a Dinomist gets added from my extra deck to my hand, right? So even if I tribute a Dinomist to attack you directly, right, like Dinomist Rex and Dinomist Spinos, they both allow me to tribute a Dinomist and either destroy a card from your side of the field or attack you directly or attack twice in a row. If I just tribute 1 Dinomist, right, then I can just get that same Dinomist back the next turn because of Dinomist Charge. And then, right, like you kind of get where it's going. Like, yeah, these Dinomists are their ammo. Their ammo, like all the Dinomists are just magazines full of ammo, and I can just keep recycling the same magazine because they go to the extra deck, right? And then this is where it ties into Howling. Howling makes it to where immediately I can put 2 Dynamists in my Pendulum Zone as soon as it's flipped, right? As soon as it's flipped. Even if you get rid of it, whatever. I already filled up my Pendulum Zone. Doesn't matter. Like, get rid of it. That's fine. I can get whatever. But if I keep Howling on the field, I can tribute a Dynamist that comes back in my hand next turn anyway. I can tribute it and get rid of something on the field. And it's not destroyed. It's just put to your hand, which is perfect because there are tons of cards that benefit from being sent to the graveyard. But I'm not sending it to the graveyard. I'm just sending it to your hand. It's perfect. It's perfect. I created such a perfect system with it, with pairing with all this shit. I'm not even sending it to the graveyard. I'm just sending it to your hand. And I only have to tribute 1 Dynamist. And I can just reset. It costs me nothing. It'll cost me a little bit of time, sure, but I can just summon as many as I want next turn. It doesn't matter, right? The only thing that would make it better is if I use like Upstart Goblin or Graceful Chair, like some card draw thing, because then I would just have more Dynamists. That would be the only benefit, right? It's a good deck that you can pair with non-pendulums. It's just I haven't had a lot of success with it. Like sometimes I just add Slifer the Sky Dragon in there for no reason because it's like it requires 3 tributes. I'm gonna have like 5 Dynamists on the field anyway. If I draw it, I might as well just tribute summon it just for fun. Yeah, but it's good.
As well put together as the Dynamist archetype is, it still has one major weakness, and it's just the fact that the attack of the strongest monster is 2500. Instead of making the Dynamist monsters super strong, because they're so easy to summon that if they were, it would be broken, the archetype instead tries to close the gap between the Dynamist and your opponent's monster's power. With cards like Dynamist Plesios, for example, which makes your opponent's monsters lose 100 attack and defense for each Dynamist you control, and Dynamic Power Load, which makes your Dynamist monsters gain 300 attack and defense. So the deck is kind of in this weird limbo where the monsters can't be made any weaker because then they would have no impact, but they can't really be made any stronger than 2500 attack because they're so easy to summon that it would just be broken. So you have these other weird cards like Plesios and Dynamic Power Load which try to just bridge that gap between your monster's attack and your opponent's. Flow also tries putting in other cards like Burden of the Mighty to bridge this gap even more, but even with that, it's usually still not enough. All you need is a monster with over 2500 attack that can't be affected by card effects, and you just win. That's it. Because if the card can't be affected by card effects, then Dynamist Howling can't put it back into your hand. And if it's over 2500 attack, then Dynamist Spinos can't destroy it. And that's it. You just win. And there's so many cards like this, which really aren't that hard to summon. And whenever I do play against Flo and he uses the Dynamist deck, I just play a Blue Eyes White Dragon deck and it's just an easy cleanup. Now that I think about it, I think that Blue Eyes might be the best possible counter to this deck. If you're playing a Dinomist deck and your opponent is playing a Blue Eyes White Dragon one, you would need to draw the literal perfect hand to be able to win, or you're just gonna lose like 90% of the time. Blue Eyes White Dragon is the deck that I play when I actually want to win, and Ojama ABC is the deck that I just play casually for fun. I know Blue Eyes isn't really the most meta competitive deck ever, and I know that in some cases it can actually be pretty bad, but this is my personal competitive deck. Like if you ask me to duel you and I'm taking it seriously, this is the one that I'm going to use right here. Now, I've put in amount of time that I don't want to specify into putting this thing together, and it's just disgusting. It's gross. I literally can't remember the last time I lost a duel with this. I think it was against Flo because he had just like the perfect opening hand and I bricked, so I lost. But this deck has caused a lot of people a lot of frustration. I feel like this deck is a really good example of the graveyard just being your second hand. I mentioned this earlier, how if you really want to get rid of a card, you either want to put it back in your opponent's hand or just banish it completely. Decks like this is why. Decks that actually benefit from having things in the graveyard. So how does it work? Basically, the goal of this deck is to get this monster called Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon out onto the field as fast as possible. And this card is just disgusting. You make it by combining 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons together. And it says your opponent cannot target or destroy this card with card effects. Once per turn, you can target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. If this card was fusion summoned using a monster whose original name is Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon as material, you can target up to 3 cards your opponent controls instead. And it has 4500 attack. Now, we have some other fusion monsters in here as just some alternatives, but this is the main one that I'm looking to get out on turn 2 or even turn 1. but a lot of times the Blue Eyes White Dragons put in so much work on their own that I don't even really need to go through the trouble of fusion summoning this guy, and I just don't. Now, the card centers around the material that's used to make this guy, which is Blue Eyes White Dragon, and it's basically just a brick. It's an effectless 8-star monster with 3000 attack, and you would have to tribute 2 monsters in order to summon it. And even when you do, it has no protection. Dinomist Howling could just send the thing back to your hand. But this whole deck works around this monster to kind of bring it to life. The first thing it does is get around all of the hassle that you would have to normally go through to get this guy onto the field. First of all, we have another monster called Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon, which just becomes Blue Eyes White Dragon. It behaves the exact same way, except you can special summon it if you have Blue Eyes White Dragon and Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon in your hand. You can just show your opponent the normal Blue Eyes and then special summon this one. And it also has an ability where you can just choose a monster your opponent controls and just destroy it. It doesn't need to have this ability, but why not, I guess. And you can special summon this guy from your hand just for having the normal one in your hand too. And remember, since Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon takes the name of Blue Eyes White Dragon and pretty much just becomes that card, it can also be used as material for the Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. We also got Fusion Deployment, which lets you show your opponent one of your fusion monsters in your extra deck, and then just special summon one of the materials you need to summon it. Show them Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon, and then just summon Blue Eyes White Dragon. We also have Melody of the Awakening Dragon. Discard a card, and then add 2 dragons with 3000 or more attack to your hand. You can just get Blue Eyes White Dragon and Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon, and then summon the Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon by showing the normal one to your opponent. It also just hands you 2 of the materials you need to make the Ultimate Dragon. It's insane, but there's even more ways that we can get Blue Eyes onto the field. For example, we have the White Stone of Ancients. If this card is in your graveyard at the end of your turn, you can go into your deck and then special summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon. And then we have another card called Dragon Shrine, which lets you send up to 2 dragon monsters from your deck to your graveyard. On top of that, we also have Return of the Dragon Lords, which just lets me special summon a Blue Eyes monster from my graveyard. So we have 1,000,001 ways to get this guy onto the field. So many ways that it's actually very easy to get 3 Blue Eyes on your board on the first turn, and then you can just fuse them together to make the alternative Ultimate Dragon, and at that point you basically win the game. But the Ultimate Dragon actually isn't my favorite card in this deck. My favorite one is Blue Eyes Jet Dragon. This card usually wins me games on its own. This card is the reason that I usually don't have to go through all of that other shenanigans to be able to summon the Ultimate Dragon. I don't even get to that point where I need to even really do that, because Blue Eyes Jet Dragon just wins the game for me. This card is so overloaded and OP, it's crazy. Its first ability is that other cards that you control can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Its second ability is that when you attack with this monster, you can choose one of your opponent's cards to add back to their hand. And then its third ability is that if Blue Eyes Jet Dragon is in the graveyard and one of your cards gets destroyed, you can just special summon it from the graveyard. If a card you control gets destroyed and it's in your graveyard, you can just special summon it and then attack with it and then send one of your opponent's cards back to their hand. And it's so easy to get this guy in the graveyard because you can just use Dragon Shrine and put him there at the beginning of the game on the first turn. This deck also has my 2 favorite trap cards in the game. The first one being Champion's Vigilance. If you control a level 7 or higher normal monster, when a monster would be summoned or a spell or trap is activated, negate the summoner activation, and if you do, destroy it. So in other words, if you control a Blue Eyes White Dragon and you have this card face down, when your opponent does anything, a spell, a trap, summons a monster, you can negate it and destroy it. Then we have Solemn Strike. So when your opponent special summons a monster, you can pay 1500 life points and negate the summon or activation and then destroy it. So there's just so much shit going on here at the same time. We have this engine to be able to summon these Blue Eyes extremely easily, to be able to fuse them into the Ultimate Dragon. We have these trap cards that stop your opponent from summoning monsters, so you can just hit them directly. And then we have Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon and Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, which can destroy your opponent's cards. So all of this together just makes this disgusting deck that just obliterates everything that I fight with it. And it's so bad that I don't really play this deck against Flo anymore, because it's just such a guaranteed win that it's not even really fun. Now, one deck that I would say counters this one pretty hard is the Buster Blader deck. He gains 500 attack for every dragon monster your opponent controls or is in their graveyard. And he starts with 2600. So if he were to fight Blue Eyes White Dragon, that would boost him up to 3100 and he would win. which is a pretty cool detail. Now, the Buster Blader archetype centers pretty much around having Buster Blader out on the field and equipping him with these tuner monsters, which when they're equipped to him, they give special effects like making your opponent not be able to do certain things, like special summon monsters from the extra deck, which is pretty brutal. So if you're fighting a dragon deck, like the Blue Eyes White Dragon one, every time your opponent summons a monster, Buster Blader is going to gain 500 attack. So all it takes is for 2 dragons to boost him up to 4,100. So what people have found out that you can do is use a trap card called DNA Surgery, and this card changes the type of all of your opponent's monsters. So if you're not fighting dragon types already, you can play DNA Surgery and then swap your opponent's monsters to dragon type to still get Buster Blader's effect. Buster Blader is one of the materials required for a fusion summon called Buster Blader the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. He gains 1,000 attack and defense for every dragon monster your opponent controls or is in their graveyard. And he changes all dragon monsters your opponent controls to defense position. And dragon monsters on your opponent's possession cannot activate their effects. So this combined with DNA Surgery, if they aren't already dragon type, just makes it so that your opponent can't even play the game.
That's Tom.
You can't activate effects on dragon monsters, so
Let's see. What do you mean?
dragon monsters cannot activate their
Oh,
effects.
then I guess this is it, because I can't do anything.
Yeah, you can't that's what I was about to say, yeah.
I guess that's GG, yeah.
Just makes it so that your opponent can't even really play the game anymore. Every time they summon a monster, they're just going to be put into defense position and not able to move it back. They're not going to be able to activate any of their effects, and they're going to give this guy 1,000 extra attack and defense. And what's even cooler about this is there's a special fusion card for the Buster Blader archetype, and it's basically a super polymerization, and it lets you use monsters from yours and your opponent's field in order to fuse together to make the fusion monster. And if you look at it, it says the materials are 1 Buster Blader and 1 dragon monster. So if you have DNA Surgery, changing your opponent's monsters to dragon, then they'll meet the requirements for you to just fuse them together with your Buster Blader to create the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. So you got rid of your opponent's monster and just gave yourself one. The only thing that kind of sucks about this monster is that he can't attack directly, but I guess that's made up for by the fact that if he attacks any of those defense position monsters, he does piercing damage. He just has so many crazy effects. I guess it's alright that he can't really attack directly, because he just stops your opponent from playing the game. Now, the most important card of this deck, besides DNA Surgery, has to be Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman. Send 1 Destruction Sword card and 1 Buster Blader card from your deck to the graveyard. Special summon 1 Buster Dragon from your extra deck or graveyard, but destroy it during the end phase of the next turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard. This turn, Destruction Sword cards you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. You can only activate 1 Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman per turn. So this card is really good because it does 2 things. For one, it sets up your graveyard by sending a Buster Blader and a Destruction Sword monster there. And it also special summons Buster Dragon, which lets you target a Buster Blader in your graveyard and then special summon it. And on top of that, it changes all of your opponent's monsters to dragon type. So just this one trap card can kind of get the ball rolling on this deck by setting up your graveyard, getting a special summon of Buster Blader, and changing all of your opponent's monsters to dragon type. There's another card called Destruction Sword Memories, which lets you discard a Destruction Sword card and then special summon Buster Blader. And you can banish it from your graveyard to fusion summon the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, but you have to banish materials to make it from your graveyard, which is good because Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman, if you didn't special summon the Buster Blader when you took out Buster Dragon, it's all set up for you to be able to use this card. Now, there are some other cards in this archetype, but I think they're kind of like meh, like they're not really that useful. But the only thing that I don't really like about this deck that much is that these are all trap cards, meaning that you can't use them on the first turn. If they were spells, I would like this deck so much better, but for some reason they just had to be traps. So if you're running 3 copies of DNA Surgery, 3 copies of Destruction Sword Memories, and 3 copies of Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman, that's a lot of traps in your deck. You probably want to run Trap Trick as well, which lets you basically just search for a trap and play it. But that's just adding even more traps. You're going to have 12 cards that you can't even really use on your first turn. You have to set them and then pass, and then on your opponent's turn, or when the turn comes back to you, you can activate them. It's just really slow. Also, maybe it's not, but it seems like whenever I play it, the deck is super dependent on DNA Surgery to change your opponent's monsters to dragon type if they're not already. Because without that, you don't really have any of the strength or the firepower. So if you just get unlucky and don't draw DNA Surgery, like you can use Prologue to special summon Buster Dragon, and he changes all of your opponent's monsters to dragon type, but with that he just gets destroyed during the end phase. I just wish there were more cards like DNA Surgery surgery or more cards in this deck that switched your opponent's monsters to dragon type. I don't know if that would be broken, but I just wish there was. Another thing is that I don't really actually know how to build a deck around this. I don't know if I have to combine it with some other archetype or something, but a lot of these cards are kind of like they're not really that useful. And since there's so many traps, it's pretty easy to just brick. And since there's a lot of traps here, it's really easy to just get a hand of them and not really be able to do anything on your first turn. So when I put all of the cards that I like find useful and like actually want to use, it's not 40 and it doesn't really make up a whole deck. So I don't really know how to build around this or what other archetype I have to combine it to. And that's why I don't really play this deck very often. Another deck that I don't really play very often, but still want to talk about because I think it's pretty interesting, is the Jinzo deck. Now, this deck centers around a monster named Jinzo, and he has an effect that says trap cards and their effects on the field cannot be activated. Negate all trap effects on the field. So when you have Jinzo on the field, your opponent can't activate any traps. Now, I think this card might be older than me. This was one of the first Yu-Gi-Oh cards ever made, and that was back when traps were a lot more important. Nowadays, since traps can't be activated on the turn that they're set, they're not really as popular as they used to be back when this card was made. And I see a lot of decks that don't even really have any traps in them, or only just run like 3 copies of one trap. If you play Yu-Gi-Oh on Dueling Nexus, where people are just sweat lords and play the most meta optimal decks possible, the only traps you're really going to see are these ones on screen. There's such a small amount of different traps that people use that I can literally just fit all of them on screen. And remember, there's like over 10,000 cards, so that's pretty insane. Now, there's a few different versions of Jinzo, the coolest one being called Jinzo Lord. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by sending one face-up Jinzo you control to the graveyard. Trap cards and their effects on the field cannot be activated. Negate all trap effects on the field. Once per turn, you can destroy as many face-up traps on the field as possible, and if you do, inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each card destroyed. Now, the first thing about this card that I don't really understand is why he has these little clips on him. It just looks really funny. Like what is this? I guess the idea is that it's Jinzo, but he put on this purple jacket outside of his normal costume. This card is pretty much just normal Jinzo, but with 2 more stars and 200 more attack. The reason I like this card though is because there's other cards in this deck that take the name of Jinzo, or basically are just substitutes for him when you put them out on the field. Like Jinzo Jector, who is a 4-star, and substitutes Jinzo when he's on the field or in the graveyard. So what I like to do a lot is play Jinzo Jector and then tribute him to special summon Jinzo Lord, since he technically counts as Jinzo, and that lets me get Jinzo Lord out on my first turn. There's also Jinzo the Machine Menace. This card just has a really cool artwork. It says if a trap card is face up on the field or in either graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, it becomes level 6 until the end of this turn. You can tribute this card to special summon 1 Jinzo from your hand or graveyard. Then you can destroy all traps your opponent controls. You can only use the effect of Jinzo the Machine Menace once per turn. So this just lets you get Jinzo out onto the field from your graveyard and destroy some of your opponent's traps in the process. 2 more cards that I think are really cool are Spell Canceller and Psychic Mega Cyber. Spell Canceller is just Jinzo, but for spells, which is pretty brutal because half of people's decks are spells, and that just means that they can't really do anything because all of their spells are just negated and they can't be activated. Only thing that sucks about this card is he only has 1800 attack, so it's really easy for your opponent to just hit him. It's very rare that I have this guy out on the field for more than 2 turns because his attack is so low and it's just so easy to destroy him. And then Psychic Mega Cyber, pretty much what this guy does is if your opponent controls more spells and traps than you do, you can just special summon him. And then if you control Jinzo, you can tribute him to take one of your opponent's monsters and make it a continuous trap. So it basically just takes a monster and just puts it in purgatory pretty much. I think this is a really interesting deck, but I just am unable to really use it as often as I want to because no decks really run traps anymore like they used to because traps aren't really that good. And another thing that sucks is you can't run any traps in your deck either because Jinzo negates all traps on the field, including yours. So there's another spell card called Amplifier, which you're supposed to equip to Jinzo, and then that lets you be able to use traps. But that's just a terrible card because it means that until you have Amplifier equipped to Jinzo and you plan on summoning Jinzo immediately, then all of the traps in your deck are just going to be bricks until you're able to equip Amplifier to Jinzo. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all of the decks that I wanted to talk about in this video. Just some ones that I've used before and find pretty interesting. There are some other ridiculous broken decks that I don't even know how to beat, and which beat me maybe 90% of the time, like Floenderies and Kestira and Yubel, but we're not going to talk about those today. I just wanted to talk about some of the decks that I personally think are really cool and that I've used, not ones that are necessarily the best and the most meta ones. But what cards should you not be playing? Well, lucky for you, it's time for the top 10 worst cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! These are cards that if I play against you and I see these in your deck, I'm gonna slap the shit out of you. It took me like 30 minutes to assemble this list, and I want to get this over with as fast as possible, so let's do this. Number 10, we got Gift of Greed. Your opponent draws 2 cards. Now, this sounds like an absolutely terrible card, and that's because it is, but the reason this takes the 10th spot, even after I explained to you how important card draw is in this game, is because this card is used in a lot of mill decks. I talked about milling earlier. It's just when you try to get rid of all the cards in your opponent's deck so that they can't draw on their draw phase and they lose the game. So this card does have some use to it, and that's why it's only in the 10th spot, even though making your opponent draw 2 cards in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, which has no energy system or anything like that, is a death sentence. In the number 9 spot, we got Card Shuffle. Pay 3,000 life points to use this card's effect. Shuffle either your or your opponent's deck. You could only use this effect during your turn. So you pay 300 life points to play this card and then shuffle your opponent's deck. Congratulations, you can now shoot yourself. Why would you ever want to do this? It's already shuffled. You shuffle the cards before the game starts. I guess maybe if your opponent used some kind of effect that made them put a certain monster on top of their deck, or search their deck for a monster and then put it on top of their deck so that they would draw it next turn during their draw phase. But no cards really even work like that. Search cards just let you take the card from your deck or your graveyard and add it to your hand. So because of that, this card gets the number 9th spot. Oh my god, useless. At number 8, we got Pot of Generosity. Shuffle 2 cards from your hand into the deck. That's it. That's it. Just shuffle. Just take 2 cards from your hand and then put them in your deck, and then you don't have them anymore. Wow. I mean, like, like why? Number 7 goes to Dark Artist, the first monster card on this list. If this card is being attacked by a light monster, its defense is halved during damage calculation only. That is all. That's it. And the thing that's crazy is it doesn't have a crazy amount of defense where this debuff would actually make sense. It's not like it has 2,500 defense or something. It has 1,400. There's monsters that are 3 stars that have more than 1,400 defense that don't have this caveat to them. It begs the question as to why this card even exists and why anyone would ever want to play it. Number 6, we got Pyro Clock of Destiny. Advance the turn count of one effect that counts turns by 1 turn. Now, that's written in the most confusing way possible, but all it means is that it makes the turn go forward by 1 turn. So if it's turn 5, you play this card and it becomes turn 6. That's it. That's all. Nothing else changes. The only reason this card would really be useful is if you're playing a card like Final Countdown, which is one of the weird alternate win conditions that I didn't talk about earlier in the video. Basically, just after 20 turns, you win. This is the only way I see this card having a use, is it could just make it take 19 turns instead, because you could just skip one of them. But you can only run 3 in your deck, so you can only advance the turn count by 3. It's not really worth 3 of your card slots when you could just use another trap card to just stall instead, like Waboku or something like that. Just stall your opponent instead of advancing it by a turn. So we're at the halfway point of this list, and this is where the cards start to get really bad. This last 5, it really took some effort to put these in the correct order, but I really think these are the 5 worst cards I have seen in any trading card game, not just Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm surprised that these were even printed. They had to have been made as some kind of joke. In the 5th spot, we have Relay Soul. Special summon 1 monster from your hand. While it is face up on the field, you take no damage. When it leaves the field, your opponent wins. Oh my god, dude. Special summon a monster from your hand, but if it gets destroyed, your opponent wins? Why would you ever want to do that? There's cards that just let you special summon monsters from your deck, and when they get destroyed, you don't lose. Why would you ever want to play this? Then we have Zone Eater, another monster card. Before I actually tell you what this card does, I'm going to tell you partially what it does, and then we're going to play a little game. So Zone Eater, when it attacks a monster, it destroys it. How long do you think it takes for the card to be destroyed after that? A, instantly. B, 5 turns. Or C, 3 turns. Think about it for a second. Think. It takes 5. A monster attacked by this card will be destroyed during the end phase of the 5th turn. That's insane. I think this is the worst monster card in Yu-Gi-Oh! On top of that, it only has 250 attack, so you're basically just going to be crashing this into a monster and taking damage for it, all for it to get destroyed at the end of the 5th turn after that. On the 3rd spot, we got the Humble Century. Reveal your hand, choose one card, and shuffle it into the deck. It's just a worse Pot of Generosity, because Pot of Generosity means you just take 2 cards and then put them into the deck. But this is worse, because you have to show the opponent your hand, and they get to like read all of your cards and see what they do if they want to. And then you take one of those cards and then put it in your deck. I just realized that this is a -2 in your card economy, because you're going to use this card and then it goes to the graveyard. And then you take another card and then put it in your deck. So this is a net loss of 2 cards. But even though Pot of Generosity is a net loss of 3, because you're throwing this card to the graveyard and then throwing 2 into the deck, if you start with 5 cards and use this, you'd only have 2 left. I think the Humble Century goes way lower than that on this list, because you show your opponent your hand and they get to read the cards and see what they do. That's just ridiculous. That's insane. The second worst card in Yu-Gi-Oh! I would say has to be Cold Feet. You cannot activate, set, or use the effects of any spells or traps this turn. It literally gives you cold feet. It makes you too scared or nervous to play the game. I don't really think I even need to elaborate on that. It just stops you from playing the game for a turn. But the number 1 worst card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to be an Unfortunate Report. It's a trap card that says your opponent conducts their next battle phase 2 times. Why would you ever want them to do this? There's no reason you would ever want them to do that. That's insane. They just get to attack you 2 times. Wow. The only way I could really think that this card could be useful is that if you're controlling a monster that's stronger than the monster your opponent is controlling. So you can use this card to force them to crash their monster into yours, and then it gets destroyed and they take damage. But no, you can't do that, because it doesn't say they attack you 2 times. It says their battle phase happens 2 times. So they can just choose that they don't want to attack you. I don't think there's any way to make this useful. This is just the worst card I've ever seen in any like trading card game in my life. And that's it. That's the top 10 worst cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! I do want to talk about some honorable mentions here. First honorable mention is Yugioh Friendship, which I think is a really wholesome card, but it sucks. Offer your opponent a handshake. If they accept your handshake, each player's life points become half the combined life points of both players. If you have Unity in your hand and show it to your opponent, they must accept the handshake. But that's kind of funny more than anything, and that's why I didn't put it on the list, even though it's terrible, because I think it has kind of like a funny factor. Like, imagine being in real life and you play this card and then just hold your hand out to your opponent. Like, while they read it, you're just awkwardly holding your hand there. Then Unity says, select one monster on your side of the field. The defense of the selected monster becomes equal to the combined original defense of all face-up monsters on your side of the field until the end of the turn. So it just raises the defense of one of your monsters. But you can also use it to force your opponent to give you a handshake when you play Yugioh Friendship. And for the other runner-up, we have Sparks. Inflict 200 points of direct damage to your opponent's life points. Like you might as well just tickle them, basically. I mean, there's better ways to deal damage. Imagine using up 3 spots in your deck to play 3 of these for a total of 600 damage. If it takes you 3 different cards in your deck to deal 600 damage to your opponent, then you're doing something wrong. So now that we've talked about some of the worst cards in this game, I want to show you guys some duels that me and my friend had. I have no idea how to smoothly segue into this. I'm sorry, but here we go.
No!
Timer.
Announce what you're doing, Goob.
Hey. Oh, I'm sorry. I fucking put Guy Harris in the field zone for no reason at all. And then, what do the fuck I do? Hold on. And then I use Duelist Alliance to grab a pendulum monster. And then I place this in the fucking pendulum zone, innit? And then, what I do is, fucking put Sword of Revealing Light on the field so you can't attack me because I bricked and I end my turn.
Alright, my turn. I play 2 cards face down. And then my turn because I bricked. Can we start over?
Right.
You want to reset?
No, we gotta play it as it is.
Alright, it's so bricky, it's so bad.
And then I'm gonna fucking add 1 odd eyes fucking shit to my hand.
Activate my trap card. Oh, Chama Trio!
I hate you.
To fill up 3 of your monster zones.
I wonder, hold on. And I can't get rid of this with like... Hold on, I can't tribute for it, but I can use the... Yeah. I can't chew it, but I can use that and get rid of it.
It's funny.
And get that. Yeah. There you go. And then I can fucking do that. And then get this nigga out.
Okay.
And then I can activate his effect, which puts shit to your hand. And then I can attack you. Take that, Kaiba.
Damn it, Yugi! I play my spell! Since I control no cards, I can use Lightning Storm!
Oh, kill yourself.
But which one should I destroy? I destroy all spell and traps!
Damn.
Now you can't summon, Negro.
Yeah, that's
And we have so many life points that 2,800 doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Man. Aw, man. Alright, whatever. Now my turn.
Oh my, I'm playing so bad, dude. Oh my god.
Damn it, Yug.
I can't draw anything.
Alright, well, I'm gonna take this W and then
Alright,
we can
take the
reset.
W and we can reset, because I want to get a good duel.
You can draw something.
Actually,
If you
I did!
There you go. If you draw the dragon, you're gonna be.
I summon Munge who have 10,000 hands to search my deck
No,
for a card.
man.
And I search the ritual card,
I like
advanced
how
ritual,
we're using ritual monsters too.
to summon Chaos Max Dragon.
No.
And then use Return of the Dragon Lords to special summon the Blue Eyes from my hand, from my graveyard.
No.
Then
No.
I'm gonna attack your Jamas with Blue Eyes Max Dragon for double piercing damage.
No.
And my turn. You thought you had the upper hand, Kaiba.
Oh no.
You did not. My grandfather's deck has no pathetic
you have a
cards.
negate?
I do.
What-
Solemn Strike!
Oh my god, kill yourself. At least you took the damage. I'm fine with that. Oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. Oh, this might be GG. Oh no. It's not good.
Alright, I attack the Ojama with Blue Eyes Max Dragon!
No.
And then hit you for game! Sit down, you're washed!
What
What is that What the fuck? Announce your penis.
Oh, I'm my pendulums. I normal summon the monster face down, and then my turn because I don't have anything.
My turn. I use fusion deployment
Oh no!
to reveal this card to special summon Blue Eyes.
No, I don't want
Then
you to
I
do
use
that.
melody of the melody
I
of the
don't want you to
Gooby
do
to
that.
throw away this, and then grab that and that.
I don't want you to do that. Oh.
Special summon this from my hand,
No, please, no.
and then
No,
you then activate King of the Swamp's ability to get a polymerization,
no.
and then activate it.
No.
And then fusion summon Blue Eyes
No.
Alternative Ultimate Dragon,
No.
then activate his ability to destroy 3 cards you control. Then I activate Melody of the Awakening Dragon. That this and this.
Oh, 2 more
And
blood.
then end phase, I use the egg to get Jet Dragon from my graveyard.
Why didn't you attack me? Or
I
not
can't
able to,
attack
or-
when I use that ability. Destroy 3 cards or attack. I want to see how you're gonna get out of this, dude.
I don't think I am. Not gonna
I
lie.
gotta know. I gotta know.
I don't think I am.
Okay. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. That was a perfect opening. There's nothing I could do. That was like a reverse Sicilian, but Yu-Gi-Oh.
Reverse Sicilian for Yu-Gi-Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, I'll get this. Play my trap card. And then battle!
No,
Use his ability to return this card to your hand.
no,
And I'll use his ability to hit this. And direct attack, Blue Eyes, Ultimate Dragon!
What do you have something to negate this? You don't. Okay. Oof.
I can just destroy
All right,
it.
buys me time.
I can destroy
How
it
can-
next turn.
How can you destroy it?
Remember? With Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon's effect. Alright. I special summon Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon.
Oh no.
Fuse them together to make Blue Eyes Twin Burst Dragon. Well, I use his ability to destroy 3 cards you control. I choose these.
No, man. I think that's GG.
And then since a card was destroyed, I can special summon Blue Eyes Jet Dragon.
Oh. Yeah, next turn is GG.
You can't, they're all immune. I can't do any of them. I don't think you can return
I
any
can't
of them.
do anything. Yeah.
I knew that was Howie.
Well, that's
Alright,
the
well,
only
the card
trap
got
that's in the
destroyed.
deck.
So I
There's
special
no-
summon Blue Eyes Jet Dragon. Just to be a dickhead, I put these back into your fucking hand.
No, I won't allow that. I'll negate it, I guess.
Yeah, GG.
Alright,
That was
GG.
that was gross.
Alright, let's see. Put Sky Iris in the field spell zone, and then I'll destroy it to get something else.
Okay, he's on to something. Cooking.
Alright, boom. I get this Negro. And then, put this Negro there, and I'll put this Bengal there, and then I fucking pendulum summon this brother, and then I'll put his mum in the defense position, and put his grandmum in attack position in it, and then special summon my nigger monster in attack position,
Okay.
and I end my turn.
Alright, my turn.
Okay,
I play a card face down,
okay.
and then a monster face down. And then
You moto.
I end my turn.
Okay, he ends his turn. Alright, activate my card. Squirt alert!
The fuck?
Squirt alert! I activate Scorcobats effect to get a fucking monster from my deck to my hand. Attack whatever that is. No, I don't want to do that.
You attacked
Oh,
Ojama Blue!
you get two things. No.
I get 2 Ojama cards, and I choose that.
Okay, you got Ojama Pajama. Alright, my turn.
I place a card, and then I use Ojama Assimilation
Oh, fuck.
to banish 3 Ojamas to get the other get the other trio,
Oh, no.
and then put them back into my deck and draw a card, and then fusion summon ABC Dragon,
What?
and then use Union Hanger
Or no, what is
to
that?
add a Crush Wyvern to my hand. Then use his
Okay.
ability. By discarding a card, I can banish one of yours. So I discard Oja Magic to destroy
Okay.
this. And Oja Magic gives me all 3
no.
Ojamas.
No!
Then I battle.
Good play. You did so much shit there. Did like 15 things.
I use my trap card, Dark Bribe.
Aww. And get this nigga.
Ojama Pajama.
Okay. That's fine. I knew it was gonna
Add
come
a
out
card
at some
to my
point.
hand.
Fine.
And discard another Ojama card. Throw this out to... Let me see.
Get rid of Sky Iris, the Pendulum Monster.
I have to get rid of... Let me get rid of this.
That's fine.
You-
Why am I always waiting for you to do something?
I'm
like,
sorry, I
Jesus
just have a million
Christ.
things I can do. The deck is so
I'm always
convoluted and
waiting for you to do
complicated.
something.
I'm sorry.
Wow. Dude, this is so tough, dude. What the fuck happened?
Nothing. Nothing yet.
Why is it at 0?
Oh, his ability. It summons it at 0 and you can't use its effects.
Oh yeah, dude, I forgot about that.
Oh,
Oh my
dude.
god, I didn't even
Oh,
read that. Oh
dude.
no, dude.
I use Ojama Assimilation.
Okay.
Throw out the trio.
Mm-hmm.
Get the other trio. Fuse them together.
Okay. You're gonna make another ABC Dragon.
And then use Ojama Pajama to get this. And then throw it out to get the 3 I just put in my deck back.
Does
So-
like 50 things per
So
turn.
I have cards to discard to do this. I throw this out.
Okay.
Then I can throw this out.
Let's see. Spiral Flame Strike.
I'm gonna use Ojama Pajama
Mhm.
to add Ojama Assimilation to my
Okay.
hand and throw out this.
I'm gonna activate his effect. So if I have no cards in my Pendulum Zone.
Oh,
I can
you're
put
not,
another one in
Gooby.
Pendulum Zone. Oh man.
I'm about to go on all
Can't do
fucking
anything.
plan.
Yeah, I just can't do anything. It's like
You're
everything I do
No.
is waiting for the
No.
opponent. Yeah. I
Can't.
can't do anything. Yeah. Well, I guess fuck me then. I guess you can't do anything. Mhm.
Alright, I'm gonna use Ojama Pajama
Okay.
to add this to my hand and throw this out to get the other 3 Ojamas
hmm
and then hit you.
Okay. Yeah, that's GG. I just didn't draw anything. I guess that's GG.
Alright, GG, man.
Yeah, GG, bro.
Got Ojama.
Yeah, I gotta. I just can't do any. I can't like breathe in and out without it being negated.
Waiting for opponent.
Everything I do is just waiting for opponent. You're like you just mathematizing every time I do something, and you can negate it.
Alright guys, so we already talked about the top 10 worst cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! So now I want to talk about the top 10 best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Including banned cards. These are the most broken cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of these cards, basically all of them, to be honest, could just win you a duel on their own in the right situation. Some of these cards, I'm just surprised that they were even created. Some of these had to have been made as some kind of joke. Number 10, we got Raigeki. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Like damn. You can just play one spell card to just destroy all of your opponent's monsters. One card. That is wild. If your opponent doesn't have some type of trap or something to negate this, then they're fucked. The only reason this is on the 10th spot and not further down is because a lot of the time destroying monsters doesn't actually destroy monsters. For example, pendulum monsters, when they get destroyed, just go to the extra deck. And a lot of cards actually have effects when they're in the graveyard and can easily just be summoned back again. This would have a much higher spot on this list if it said banish all monsters your opponent controls instead. Which you might think that that sounds ridiculously broken, but back in the day, before pendulum monsters and before the graveyard was your second hand, it was as powerful then as it would be now if it said banish all monsters your opponent controls. Number 9, we have Super Polymerization. This is an unbanned card. I think this is the only card on this list that isn't banned. Fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from either field as fusion material. Neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. So you fuse together a monster using components from either field, and that includes your opponents. So you can just take their monsters and then use them to summon your own monster if their monsters meet the requirements. And they can't even use a trap or anything to negate it. It can't be affected by card effects. So if this gets used on you and you get both of your monsters used into one of your opponent's monsters, then fuck you, I guess. There's nothing you can do. Number 7, we got Cyberstein. This is a card I used to run pretty often, actually. You can pay 5,000 LP, special summon one fusion monster from your extra deck. For 5,000 LP, you can special summon any fusion monster in the game, pretty much. Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon? Sure. You can reliably bring him out on the first turn every time, as long as you just pay 5,000 life points. Which is like, yeah, I have a whole deck that's built around trying to get him out on the first or second turn. He's so powerful that you're supposed to need an entire deck built around him to be able to actually play him. But with this, you don't need that. All you need is one card. You don't need to make this whole engine to be able to summon him easily. Then we got Max C. During either player's turn, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons a monster, immediately draw one card. Every time your opponent special summons a monster, you get to draw a card immediately. You can easily draw like 4 cards on the first turn if your opponent special summons 4 monsters, and that's a conservative estimate. People on fucking Dueling Nexus special summon spam so often, you might deck out. Then we got Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. Cannot be normal summoned, must be special summoned from your hand by banishing 1 light and 1 dark monster from your graveyard. Once per turn, you can pay 1,000 LP. Send as many cards in both players' hands and on the field as possible to the graveyard. Then inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each card sent to the opponent's graveyard by this effect. So you can play this card and then send your opponent's entire hand to the graveyard, and then every card on their field to the graveyard, because you can choose how many of each player's cards you want to send to the graveyard. So you can just pick all of their cards except the ones that benefit from being in the graveyard, like their whole hand, every monster that they have except the White Stone of Ancients, send it to the graveyard. And then if you have any cards you need to put in the graveyard, you can put them there too. And all you need to summon this guy is to just have 1 light monster and 1 dark monster in your graveyard, which is really not that hard to do. Then we got Exchange of the Spirit. If both players have 15 or more cards in their graveyards, pay 1,000 LP. Each player swaps the cards in their graveyard with the cards in their deck, so you can use this card to just deck out your opponent instantly, basically. No broken cards list is complete without Pot of Greed. I already talked about this card a bit ago. I'm not going to talk about it again. You already know why it's broken. But then in the number 3 spot, this is where it really starts to get bad. We got Royal Oppression. Either player can pay 800 life points to negate the special summon of a monster and or effect that special summons a monster and destroy those cards. So whenever your opponent special summons a monster, you can pay 800 life points and then destroy it. Just to show how much of a big deal this is, people play a card called Solemn Judgment, and that card can basically negate anything in the game, a spell or a trap, but people mostly use it on a monster summon or special summon. And that card requires you to spend half of your life points to activate it. And then there's Solemn Strike, which is basically just Solemn Judgment, but only for special summons. and that card still requires you to pay 1500. So the fact that you can pay 800 life points and stop your opponent from special summoning a monster and destroy it is just insane. As many times per turn as you want, because it's a continuous trap card. Number 2, we got Return from a Different Dimension. Pay half of your life points. Special summon as many of your banished monsters as possible. You can just fill up your entire board with banished monsters. For the number 1 spot, the most broken card in Yu-Gi-Oh! In my opinion, we have Painful Choice. Select 5 cards from your deck and show them to your opponent. Your opponent selects 1 card among them, add that card to your hand, and discard the remaining cards to the graveyard. You take 5 cards out of your deck. You get to pick one, and then you throw the rest in your graveyard. This is the most broken card ever. You could just cycle through your deck to get whatever you want in your graveyard, and then use Monster Reborn on it and special summon it. That's just one of the many things you could do with this card. This is the most broken card. You just get to, like, cycle your way through your deck and just get anything you want. And I'm sure this card wasn't really as broken as it was back in the day when it came out, when a card being sent to the graveyard meant it was banished, basically, because there was not many ways to get cards back except for Monster Reborn. But nowadays, having to send a card to the graveyard or discard a card isn't really a cost. It's more of like an advantage, to be honest. But yeah, that's it. In my opinion, the top 10 most broken cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! I would say the most powerful card, though, has to be C1000 Numernoius Numeronia. Flo actually showed me this card while I was recording the last section. I just thought I had to talk about it in the video. The reason I'm just putting this here as an honorable mention and not actually on the top 10 most powerful cards ever list is because this thing is nearly impossible to summon, to the point where I don't even know how you would even use this card. It's an Xyz monster that, to summon it, you would need to tribute 5 level 13 monsters, meaning you would have to have all 5 of your monster zones filled with a level 13 monster. That's actually impossible. There's no way you're going to be able to do that. And what makes it even worse is that a level 13 monster isn't really a thing. There's only 2 level 13 monsters in the game. The first one is Rataraptor Rising Rebellion Falcon, which is another Xyz monster that also requires 5 level 13 winged beast monsters, and Numernoius Numeronia itself. So how the fuck do you summon this thing? The reason that this card is so ridiculously impossible to summon is because of its effect. If this card is special summoned by the effects of C1000 Numeronius, which I'll talk about in a second, this card gains 100,000 attack and defense during your opponent's turn only. Also, apply the following effects from the start of the next turn after this card was special summoned, so on your opponent's turn after you summon this. Monsters your opponent controls must attack this card if able. At the end of your opponent's turn, if this card did not battle, you win the duel. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can detach 1 material from this card, negate the attack, and if you do, gain LP equal to that monster's attack. In other words, if you summon this guy, you just win. Unless your opponent has the luckiest Heart of the Cards Raigeki, there's no way they're going to win after you summon this card, because I don't think it's protected from card effects, so you could just use ABC Buster Dragon to banish this thing. Just imagine going through all of the work you would have to do to summon this monster, and then I just banish it with my stupid Ojama Dragon. But let's look at number C1000 Numeronius. That's the card that Numernoius Numeronia is talking about. This card, to summon it, requires 5 level 12 monsters, so this thing isn't even really much easier to summon. Once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card, destroy 1 other monster on the field. At the end of the battle phase, destroy as many other monsters on the field as possible. Then you can special summon 1 monster from your opponent's graveyard to your field. If this card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while it has material and is sent to your graveyard, you can special summon 1 number IC1000 Numernoius Numeronia from your extra deck, and if you do, attach this card to it as material. In order to summon number IC1000 with Numeronius effect, which is the way that the game itself recommends you do it, you would need 5 level 12 monsters. Then you would need to tribute them all to summon this guy, and then get it to be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, and then you would be able to summon the big guy. How the fuck would you even do that? That's a bit easier than Numernoius Numeronia's summoning condition, which is 5 level 13 monsters, which basically means it's fucking impossible. You would need 3 copies of Rataraptor and then 2 copies of itself. It's impossible to summon. So I did a little bit of searching around on the internet, and I found this Reddit post that got a lot of upvotes and seemed to get a lot of comments and attention when it was first posted. And it seems like this right here is the internet's best strat of how to summon this guy. So let's go through it. I'll try to do another little animation so you can kind of get an idea of what it's talking about. Step 1. Summon 3 copies of number 70, Malevolent Sin. This is another Xyz card that to summon it, you need to tribute 2 level 4 monsters. So to summon 3 copies of this guy, you would need to summon 6 level 4 monsters somehow and then tribute them all. Without any of them getting destroyed, you would need all 6 to be able to tribute to get 3 of these. So let's assume that in some universe, your opponent fell asleep and passed their turn like 8 times, and you were able to do that. Its effect says, once per turn, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card. Then target 1 monster your opponent controls. Banish it until your opponent's next standby phase. At the end of the damage step, if this card attacked, you can make this card gain 300 attack, and if you do, increase its rank, meaning level, by 3. So that brings us to step 2, which is to attack the opponent 3 times with each of the number 70s to make them all rank 13. So your opponent is still asleep, right? They're still asleep and they let you do this. And you somehow don't win the game from doing that because number 70 has 2400 attack. And if you attacked with him 9 times, that would be 21,600 damage. So your opponent has infinite life points and is asleep. All right, let's just make that assumption. All right, step 3, set to I'm just gonna say X Magician in the pendulum scales and use their pendulum effects, targeting 2 malevolent sins. So this is X Magician. Its effect says, once per turn, you can target 1 face-up Xyz monster you control. This turn, you can use it as an Xyz material for an Xyz summon using its rank as if it were a level. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can target 1 light monster on the field. That face-up monster has its effects negated until the end of the turn. So put 2 of these in your pendulum zones and then use the effect that changes the ranks to levels that can be added to the monster's level, and then use it on 2 of the malevolent sins to bring their levels to 13. But now you only have 2 malevolent sins that are at level 13, and you have 2 pendulum zones that are filled up with X Magicians. So you need to use Wavering Eyes, a card that says destroy as many cards in each player's pendulum zones as possible, then apply these effects in sequence depending on the number of cards destroyed by this effect. And if you destroy 2, it gives you the effect to be able to add 1 pendulum monster from your main deck to your hand. So use Wavering Eyes to destroy both of your X Magicians. Then get your 3rd copy of X Magician from your deck and then place it onto the field in one of the pendulum zones and then use its effect to bring the final malevolent sin to level 13. After that is step 5, which is to summon 2 Fortune Lady Waters. This would take 2 more turns, but it's okay because our opponent is asleep. This card's effect says, the attack and defense become its level times 300. Once per turn during your standby phase, increase this card's level by 1, max of 12. If this card is special summoned while you control a Fortune Lady monster, except Fortune Lady Water, draw 2 cards. Then step 6 is to play 3 copies of Time Passage. Increase the level of 1 face-up Fortune Lady monster you control by 3 until the end phase. So you use 3 copies of these, and that will bring 1 of the Fortune Lady's levels to 13. But then you still need to get the other one to 13, so step 7 is to use 3 copies of Magical Stone Excavation to discard 2 cards and then target 1 spell in your graveyard and add it to your hand. And do this for all 3 copies of Time Passage so that you can get them back and use them on the other Fortune Lady. So I guess for this demonstration, we're also assuming that we have an infinite hand of cards because we would need to discard 6 of them to be able to use 3 Magical Stone Excavations. Even though the hand size limit is 7, and after you get to 7 cards, you would have to discard 1. So that makes everything that we did before this impossible. Unless we assume that we had infinite cards on the field the whole time. So let's just assume that. And now, we're finally done. We have 5 monsters that are level 13. And now, we can summon Numernoius Numeronia. But we can't, because if we do that, then he'll have 0 attack and defense. Notice that it says, if this card is special summoned by the effect of C1000 Numeronius, it gains 100,000 attack and defense during your opponent's turn. And also apply the following effects. So if you summon it like this, then it won't have any of those effects. So what we have to do first is tribute all of them to summon number C1000 Numeronius. And then our opponent has to wake up from his slumber and then be like, oh shit, and play a Raigeki. So that would mean that it would get destroyed by a card effect, and then we can summon number C1000 Numernoius Numeronia and attach it to it as material. Oh my god. I think it's safe to say that this guy is actually impossible to summon. Like, this is a card that was just made for show, I guess. There's no way this could ever be played in an actual game. I tried to search online for a deck that somebody made out of this card, or a demonstration of somebody summoning it, or or anything at all, and I could not really find any examples. The only things I really found when I looked up how to actually use this card is like 2 videos of people summoning it in Master Duel when they're obviously just in a game with their friend and he's just stalling hard as shit to let them be able to go through whatever hoops and hurdles they're going to use to summon him, and then they post it and act like, oh my god, I summoned Numeronius, whoa! That's the only thing I've seen. So I'm convinced that in an actual game this guy is impossible to summon, and it makes sense because he is the most powerful card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And you can buy him off of TCG Player for only 18 cents. I don't know why I thought he would be like $30 or something. Why did I think he was expensive? I guess because he was so powerful, but when you think about it, the card is fucking unplayable. So nobody can play it, meaning nobody wants it, meaning it's worthless. Isn't that insane? But if you don't have that kind of money to be able to buy cards in real life, you can just play Yu-Gi-Oh! Online like I do. I actually don't even own a single Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. I've never bought one. That's because I play online on Dueling Nexus, which is a website that you can go to right now and build your own deck and play against people for free. I have no idea how it's possible, but this website has all 12,000 Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and you can make a deck out of any of them and then go battle other people. What I've been seeing a lot of other people use to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Online is this other software called yugioh Pro, which is the same thing, but it just looks so janky compared to Dueling Nexus. Dueling Nexus just looks so much better. Even if they're the same thing, Dueling Nexus is so simple to use. It's just a website. Just go on the website, make an account in like 2 seconds, and you have access to every Yu-Gi-Oh! Card and you can duel people. And yugioh Pro is just ugly. Just look at it. Like, just look at this, dude. It just looks like shit. He won, though, because if you go on Dueling Nexus to try to play the single player against other people to just see how good your deck is, you're going to get annihilated unless you're playing something super meta or you're just goated at the game. Last night, I hopped on Dueling Nexus with my Ojama deck to try to see how good this thing actually was against experienced Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, and I can't even really explain to you how bad I got annihilated. I'm just gonna show you.
Wow. Alright, well, fuck me, I guess. I'll just shoot myself then. Ooh, good hand! Good hand! Good hand! Good hand! Oh, it's a labyrinth. Fuck me. Oh my god, it's a fucking labyrinth deck, dude.
What did labyrinth decks do?
I don't know. I just lose to them every time. My turn. I play Magician Souls! I use his ability. Send this. And this. And draw 2 cards. Perfect! Perfect! I use Twin Twisters to discard Ultra Magic to get rid of that and that. Wow. You can just negate stuff. When your opponent activates a card effect that targets a card you control, you can negate that effect. And if you do destroy it, there's no like, that's it, just every time. Like there's no like, there's no con or drawback to doing that. It's just every time.
You got this, Hero.
That's you. You're right.
That nigga ain't.
He can just negate anything he wants. What the fuck? If a card or effect targets a card you control, you can negate that effect. And if you do destroy that card.
Dang, that's so strong.
That's it! And there's no catch! He can just do whatever he wants! Like just as many times, just forever? What kind of busted ass shit? He just negate it. If an opponent doesn't affect, negate it. Bit of a bricky hand, eh? Let me see. He's gonna play like fucking Kastira, like Flow Injuries. If he plays Kastira, I'm out. Alright, I'm about.
What? It's just swords.
Alright. Alright.
Why do you play swords so much? It's not that good of a card. It's just stall.
Exodia! Flo is playing Exodia!
Bro, you better finish this shit now.
He's playing Exodia! Oh my god! He had Sangon to search for. This card is sent from the field to the graveyard. Add 1 monster with 1500 or less attack and redact your head. Use it to search for Exodia pieces! Oh my god!
Dude, you better get this shit done. No wonder he's using Swords of Revealing Light. It's just, he's stalling. You better end this shit fast. It's so interesting. I've never seen an Exodia deck used.
Oh, that was so smart for me. Alright, now, do this. Okay, I gotta think. I gotta use my brain. I use my brain. If I banish this, It won't go to the graveyard, and he won't get a piece for it, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right. What does the effect say?
If it goes to the graveyard, he gets to search his deck for a piece, basically. But
Yeah,
if I
so then
banish
if-
Swords of Revealing Light, maybe I can kill him and do that before he gets before then. I'm gonna banish this. I'm gonna banish this. I'm gonna see if I can kill him before he gets it. I'm betting on the fact that I can kill him before he gets all 5. I don't think he's gonna be able to. He got 1 piece. We know he has 1. Oh, this is not good, dude. This is not good. This is not good, man. Oh, no. Oh, dude, when these get destroyed, so he's gonna get 1 piece for each of them. We know he has 1.
That banish effect, dude, he would have won.
He surrendered. I won. He surrendered.
Alright guys, I think that that's everything that I've ever wanted to say to anyone about Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. I think this is the longest one I've ever made. It took me a really long time to make, so that's why I haven't posted in like 2 weeks. It's because I've been working on this video the whole time. I also want to say that this whole video or like project or whatever is in memory of Bean, Flo's cat, that I used for the background of like a lot of videos actually. Unfortunately, Bean died yesterday. I think I talked over footage of Bean in like 3 or 4 of my videos, and it just sucks. Like I have so many like funny clips and like funny pictures of Bean saved in my computer because I talk over them for videos, and there's not going to be any more funny videos of Bean, which I don't know, man. I really like that cat, dude. I know it's not even my cat, but I really like that cat, bro. It just makes me a little upset. But yeah, this video is for Bean, bro. Before I completely end the video though, I just want to leave you guys with some deck recommendations of some decks for you guys to start building, because if you're just first getting into Yu-Gi-Oh, there's just so many cards, and what could happen is, since there's so many cards, you end up just making a deck that just happens to be shit, or just choosing a shit archetype, and then you go into play your games and you're just like, oh damn, I'm just getting annihilated, and it's because you're playing with shit cards or just using an archetype that's not very good. I'm gonna say, if this video has convinced you to start playing Yu-Gi-Oh and you go on Dueling Nexus, I'd recommend you use a burn deck to like kind of learn about the game a little bit. I talked about the card Sparks earlier, which is a spell that just deals 200 damage to your opponent, but there's way better cards than this, like Uzaki, which I think deals 1000 damage. You can just research a little bit into how to make a burn deck, which is just a deck that utilizes cards that deal damage directly to your opponent without really using monsters. So cards like Magic Cylinder or Uzaki, or like it's called like Circle of Destruction or something like that, deals 1000 damage. And then just go and build a deck around these cards, because it's super simple. Anybody can play a burn deck, and then while playing this, you're going to see other people are using decks against you that are a lot more complicated, and eventually you're just going to get annihilated by some deck that you find is the coolest thing ever, and then that will be the deck that you want to use. It's almost like starting as the recruit in Rainbow Six Siege, or starting out as Garen in League of Legends. That's what I consider playing a burn deck to be. It's just a simple deck you can play, and then eventually you're just going to get obliterated by somebody using a deck that you think is super cool, and then you're going to be like, dude, I gotta use that. That's like the dopest strat I've ever seen. So start with a burn deck. Here's a deck list that you can kind of look at, but I recommend you kind of change this. This isn't really the best version. Do a little bit of research, maybe like tweak this and make it better. This deck isn't really that good. It's just a template to kind of show you what a burn deck looks like that I made in like 5 minutes. Another tip I would have is don't use that many traps. Traps really aren't that good. If you're gonna use traps, just use like Imperm, or use some of the Solemn cards, or maybe use Evenly Matched. A lot of the trap cards that seem like they're really good really are not that good. You're gonna just be wasting your time because they take a full turn to activate, and nowadays Yu-Gi-Oh is just played so much faster than it was like 20 years ago. If you have a deck with a lot of traps, you're gonna find it really hard to win, because on the first turn these are just unusable cards. They're just bricks. Even traps like Mirror Force aren't really that good, because so many cards just can be easily summoned back from the graveyard or are immune to card effects. Just don't waste your time with majority of the traps. Stick to ones that benefit you in your archetype that you're playing, or just use the Solemns or like Imperm or Evenly Matched or something like that. Also, another super important thing to remember to do is when you're playing against somebody, especially in real life, just take the time to read what their cards do. Like, you can even be like, give me a second, let me read this card. Just knowing what cards your opponent is using and what they do, and like what plan they're trying to do, can help you win games. Don't just let your opponent play the game in front of you without knowing what they're doing. And definitely don't be afraid to tell them, hey, wait a second, let me read this card. Because if you don't do that, then you're just going to be playing the game blind and you're just going to get steamrolled. The last, like, imparting message that I'm going to leave for you if you go and play Yu-Gi-Oh! After this is look out for this card. Ash Blossom. This is what's called a hand trap, meaning it's a card that your opponent can just play from their hand, like a spell, but they can use it on your turn. So it's a trap they play from the hand, if that makes any sense. So what Ash Blossom does is basically, if you play a card that allows you to draw a card from your deck, they can negate it and stop you from doing that. And this card is in majority of decks. I would say 75% of decks use this card because it's so good. So I would recommend for you to run 2 or 3 copies of this card if you have some extra space in your deck you need to fill up, because it's very useful. You can win games with just this card. You can shut people down with this thing and just destroy their whole plan. Any search card, any card that lets you go through your deck and draw a card, anything that adds something from your deck to your hand, you can negate it with Ash Blossom, even if it's their turn and it's not even your turn. Also, knowing that majority of the other people's decks have Ash Blossom in them, and that they could have it on the first turn, what you can do a lot of the time is bait this card out. Like, if you have a card that you really need to use because it's your main searcher and it'll search for your deck for what you need, and then you have an Upstart Goblin, play the Upstart Goblin first, then that'll use up their Ash Blossom, and then play your search card, instead of just playing your search card first, because then that's going to get Ash Blossomed, and then your plan is over and you're fucked. So yeah, that's it. I'm talking you guys' ears off pretty bad. I just want to leave like some knowledge for you guys getting into the game, because the last thing I would want is for you guys to start playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And then get discouraged and be like, oh my god, I'm getting OTK'd, and then just quit. But this is some information that I wish I knew when I first started that will help you win games. So yeah, once again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the video. I kind of got all of my thank yous and everything out of the way, but if you enjoyed this video and you want to support the channel more than subscribing, be sure to hit that join button. It's like being a Twitch sub to the channel basically, and it gives you access to the Coffee Pot podcast that me and Flo really need to record some more episodes for. It's really funny. So yeah, hit the join button, become a member, check out the podcast, and let me know what you think. And yeah, I think that's everything. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you real soon.